In 1921, one of the most devastating massacres in U.S. history took place in Tulsa, Oklahoma. The 1921 Tulsa race riots. The black community of North Tulsa, called Black Wall Street, or as whites called it, Little Africa, was completely burned to the ground in a mere 12-hour period. Over 1,300 businesses and homes were destroyed and completely ruined. 10,000 people were left homeless in the night, and to this day, no one knows how many people actually died. One of the bloodiest race riots in the nation's non-military history had begun. The spark for the tender was ignited on Monday, May 30th, 1921. Here's the story.
Years of struggling and sacrifice, people have begun to look upon Tulsa as the Negro metropolis of the Southwest. Going north to Archer Street for 2 or more blocks, one could see nothing but Negro businesses. Going east, you would behold Greenwood Avenue, the Negroes' Wall Street. There were homes of beauty and splendor, and the schools and churches were well attended. It was a city within a city, and some malicious newspapers took pride in referring to it as Little Africa.
By 1921, Tulsa's black population had grown to almost 11,000, and the Greenwood community was booming. 15 grocery stores, 2 black movie houses, 2 black newspapers, 4 drugstores, 2 black public schools, a black public library, 4 barbecue and chili parlors, and about 13 churches.
I started a beauty shop dressing hair in 1915 in the home. We had money, but we were not able to go and purchase things, so it helped us to go into business for our own selves. And then that's when the black people began to build.
In the early 1900s, a group of black businessmen had purchased a small piece of land in the northeast section of Tulsa. They called it Greenwood. As segregation practices had grown in white Tulsa, so had the black businesses in Greenwood. In Tulsa, the Ku Klux Klan included political leaders and members of the police. Even local newspapers supported mob violence.
It was put before us. The whites felt that they could instill fear in the black community, and blacks wasn't going for it, and it was a confrontational type of attitude that existed.
They passed one law after another to keep blacks separate and in their place. Schools, hospitals, businesses, even telephone booths were to be segregated.
Basically in Oklahoma, right after statehood, you had racial bigotry that was out in the open. And I think that this had more to do with helping the development of black townships, because blacks tended to congregate together for their own self-protection.
But no one, black or white, was prepared for what happened on the night of May 31st, 1921.
The Ku Klux Klan mob, having largely been made up of veterans, began to militarily organize themselves. And they divided down into squads and ran a skirmish line along Archer.
After watching the men unload on First Street, where we could see them from our windows, we heard such a buzz and noise that on running to the door to get a better view of what was going on, the sights our eyes beheld made our poor hearts stand still for a moment. There was a great shadow in the sky, and upon a second look, we discerned that this cloud was caused by fast approaching airplanes. It then dawned us that the enemy had organized in the night and was invading our district, the same as the Germans invaded France and Belgium. Mother, I see men with guns. Then I ran to the window and looked out. There I saw many people gathered in little squads talking excitedly. Going downstairs to the street, I was told of the threatened lynching and that some of our group were going to give added protection to the boy. Looking south out of the window of what then was the Woods building, we saw carloads of men with rifles unloading up near First Street. Then the truth dawned upon us that our men were fighting in vain to hold their dear Greenwood, Mary Parish.
As daylight approached, the whites were given a signal by a whistle, and the outrage took place. All of this happened while innocent Negroes were slumbering and did not have the least idea they would fall victims to such brutality. At the sound of another whistle, more than a dozen aeroplanes went up and began to drop turpentine balls on the Negro residences, while 5,000 whites with machine guns and other deadly weapons fired in all directions. But to no avail, as they were met on all sides with volleys of shot. They were killed in great numbers as they ran, trying to flee to safety.
White grand jury placed the blame for the Holocaust squarely on the black population. Also blaming the black population was Tulsa's white churches, the Chamber of Commerce, and of course Tulsa's white newspapers. Cities across America offered assistance, but Tulsa officials turned down all the offers under the guise of handling the problems themselves.
Tulsa Tribune makes no apology to the police commissioners or to the mayor of this city for having pled with them to clean up the cesspools in this city.
Didn't have one thing left and never received a dime. Up until this day, they never. And it ought to be added in order they ought to be made pay. Even the children that suffered. Our children have suffered because their parents lost everything they had, and the children weren't able to get along, and they were doing fine.
And the thing that I could not understand was why these innocent people who were helpless as babes were placed under guard. Nevertheless, heavily armed guards were all around the building.
With homes looted, homes and stores burned to ashes, with sick, aged, and enfeebled carried out or left to perish in the flames, mothers giving birth to children in the open, herded, guarded, and corralled like prisoners of war, and before the smoke of 1,000 homes had blown away, the trembling and homeless learned that the city fathers had passed an ordinance making it forever impossible for them in their destitute condition to go back and rebuild on their home place. G.A. Gregg.
The city council or commissioners passed an ordinance that there could be no construction in the city of Tulsa that was not fireproof. Now, with people absolutely without any resources, it was impossible for them to conform to any requirement that they rebuild only fireproof structures. And my father said, you build. If they arrest you, I'll get you out of jail. You can go on building. And my dad had challenged the constitutionality of that city ordinance. And the Supreme Court of the state of Oklahoma declared that ordinance unconstitutional as being a frivolous piece of legislation designed to keep blacks down.
With their hearts bleeding, their homes, and all of the relics that make the memories of life's past sustaining, with shocking realization that their families are broken and scattered in fearing mob, with trembly, weak, hungry, and hungerless bodies compelled to be in the stalls of the fairgrounds under a heavy, cruel guard who greets them with harsh orders and vulgar language, while suffering all this and more. The mayor, commissioners, the real estate exchange, the welfare board are like those who crucified Christ, casted lots for the Negro's hard-earned land. G.A. Gregg.
Not only was the area declared a fire zone, which effectively was designed to prevent it from being rebuilt, but then amazingly, just incredibly, the city fathers put the land up for sale.
Through the Reconstruction Committee appointed by the mayor and city commissioners June 14th, Tulsa extends a welcoming hand to wholesale houses and industrial plants, which are to be located on the trackage property in Little Africa, swept by fire, and which is now within the city fire limits, restricted to the erection of fire-resisting buildings. Tulsa World, June 15th, 1921.
In order to help people get in touch with their loved ones who were anxious to hear from them, Mr. Theo Bowman, the Oklahoma Sun, succeeded in getting out a little daily paper. Each day, he would publish these lists. Each day, people sat under the tent and watched for these lists as well as the lists of dead in the big dailies. The dead were so quickly disposed of on that night and day until it was impossible to ever get an exact record of the dead and wounded.
The committee also expressed a sentiment in favor of using a part of the burned area for a Union station whenever such a project is ready for consideration by the railroads entering Tulsa.
Few black Tulsans had insurance, and those who did had clauses which voided the policies in case of a riot. Those making a claim had to prove that the city or state government was negligent in protecting their property. An impossible burden because the victors had already begun to rewrite the history and insulate themselves from blame.
I know a place that was sure